Hello, family. Welcome to Stories with Medezi. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Lillian stepped out of the taxi, expecting the warmth of home to embrace her after her business trip, but instead, the sight before her turned her blood cold. Her luggage was strewn across the pavement, clothes spilling out, luxury bags tossed carelessly, and even personal items, jewelry, books, photo albums, scattered like trash. The humiliation stung like a fresh wound, but what truly shattered her was the sound of laughter from inside the house. A woman's voice, light and mocking, filled the air, followed by Daniel's low chuckle. She didn't need to guess who it was. Bianca. The woman she had suspected for months, the one Daniel had sworn was just a friend. Lillian's hands trembled as she clenched her suitcase handle, but she didn't storm inside. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked away. That silence, that control, would haunt them far more than any words ever could. As she slid into the taxi, the driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror, concern flickering in his eyes. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lillian inhaled sharply, forcing back the sting of tears. No, she was not okay. Her entire world had just crumbled, and the man she had given everything to had replaced her without a second thought. But she would not cry, not here, not now. Lifting her chin, she spoke with a steadiness that surprised even herself. "Just drive." The taxi pulled away, leaving behind the house she had built with love, the home she had believed would be her forever. They had discarded her like she was nothing, but they had no idea what was coming. The dim hotel room was cold, and Lillian sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall, trying to process everything. How had it come to this? She had been a devoted wife, standing by Daniel through thick and thin, only to be discarded for a cheaper, shinier replacement. Tears threatened to spill, but she clenched her fists. Crying won't fix this. Memories flooded her mind. The way Daniel used to hold her close on rainy nights, how he would kiss her forehead and promise she was the only one. Lies. All of it. The betrayal ran deeper than the affair. It was the realization that she had been sleeping next to a stranger for years. She picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over Daniel's number. But what would she even say? That she still loved him? That she wanted to fix what he had already destroyed? No. She had loved him with everything she had, and he had thrown her away without a second thought. Lillian dropped the phone on the nightstand, her jaw tightening. She refused to be another woman begging a man to choose her. He had already made his choice. Slowly, she stood, walking toward the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked broken, but deep within her eyes was something else, determination. Bianca thought she had won, but Lillian was about to show her what real power looked like. She wasn't going to fight with tears or plead for an explanation. She was going to take back everything. Lillian straightened her posture and whispered to her reflection, "You will not break." And for the first time since walking away, she felt something other than pain. She felt ready. Bianca twirled around the luxurious living room, her silk robe brushing against her thighs as she poured herself a glass of wine. The scent of Lillian's favorite vanilla candles still lingered in the air, but she smirked, knowing it would soon be replaced by hers. She had won. Lillian had walked away without a fight, proving that she was weak, just as Bianca had always believed. "I expected more drama," she mused, sinking into the couch, swirling the wine in her glass. Daniel stood near the window, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. He hadn't expected Lillian to leave so easily, and something about her silence unnerved him. "She didn't even yell," he muttered. Bianca laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "That's because she knows it's over. She's nothing without you, Daniel." She leaned closer, pressing her lips to his neck. "And now I'm the only woman in your life." But even as she spoke, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it had been too easy. Women like Lillian didn't just disappear. Daniel exhaled heavily, grabbing his drink from the table. He should have felt relieved, but instead he felt a strange unease creeping into his gut. He had expected Lillian to cry, to beg, to fight for him. Instead, she had walked away like he was a stranger on the street. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind. but Bianca was already pulling him into a kiss, her hands trailing down his chest. "Forget her," she whispered, her voice sultry. "She's in the past now." Daniel nodded, forcing himself to agree. But as he closed his eyes, an image of Lillian's expressionless face as she left haunted him. He pushed the thought away, not knowing that his past wasn't done with him yet. Not by a long shot. Lillian sat in the dim glow of the hotel room, her fingers tracing the rim of a coffee cup that had long gone cold. The betrayal wasn't just in Daniel's infidelity. It was in how easily he had erased her. One moment, she was his wife, his partner, the woman he had promised forever to, and the next, she was nothing but an inconvenience discarded onto the street. The weight of it settled in her chest like an iron bar, making it hard to breathe. She pulled open her suitcase, the contents still messy from when they had been thrown out. As she ran her fingers over the fabric of her wedding dress, carefully folded at the bottom, a sob broke free. How foolish had she been to believe in a love that was never real. The pain clawed at her insides, but she refused to let it consume her. She wiped her tears with trembling fingers, inhaling sharply. "This will be the last time I cry for him." Her phone vibrated, snapping her out of the storm in her head. She grabbed it, half expecting Daniel's name to appear, but of course, he hadn't called. He wasn't worried. He wasn't searching for her. Instead, it was a name she hadn't seen in years, Victor. A man from her past, one who had once warned her about Daniel. She hesitated before answering. "Lillian," his deep voice came through, calm yet firm. "I heard what happened. If you want to win this, I can help you." She closed her eyes, gripping the phone tighter. A part of her wanted to handle this alone, but another part, the part that was tired of being the fool, wanted to hear him out. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "Tell me what you know." Sitting across from Victor in the dimly lit lounge, Lillian felt the weight of his gaze as he slid a folder toward her. "Daniel is not as smart as he thinks he is," he murmured. Lillian hesitated before opening it, her heart hammering against her ribs. Inside were bank statements, hotel reservations, credit card transactions, all linked to Bianca. She skimmed through the documents, her fingers tightening with every revelation. Thousands of dollars spent on Bianca. Lavish gifts, weekend getaways, even a secret apartment under her name. Lillian swallowed hard. This wasn't just an affair. This was a long-term betrayal. "How long?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. Victor took a sip of his drink. "Almost a year. Maybe longer." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "So, while I was planning our future, he was building one with her." The pain was suffocating, but beneath it, a slow, simmering rage began to rise. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. "I need more than this," she said, her voice sharper now. "I need leverage." Victor nodded, sliding another paper toward her. "Then you're going to love this." Lillian's breath caught in her throat as she scanned the document. It wasn't about Bianca, it was about Daniel. A forged property deed, her house, the one she had paid for, now legally transferred to his name without her consent. The cold chill ran through her veins as realization dawned. He hadn't just betrayed her emotionally. He had stolen from her. Lillian's fingers curled around the paper, her nails digging into the edges. "You thought I would break, Daniel?" She lifted her head, meeting Victor's knowing gaze. "I want it all," she said. "Every single thing they took from me, I want it back." Lillian sat in her lawyer's office, her fingers gripping the armrests of the chair as she absorbed the full weight of what Victor had uncovered. The document in front of her, stamped with legal approval, stated in black and white that her house was no longer hers. Daniel had manipulated the paperwork, ensuring that the property, the home she had invested in with her hard-earned money, was now entirely under his name. It wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a calculated, cold-blooded deception. The lawyer, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, studied her carefully. "This isn't just unethical," she said, tapping a manicured finger against the paper. "It's fraud. With the right legal approach, we can fight this." "But Lillian, are you prepared for war?" Lillian exhaled, a slow, measured breath, before lifting her gaze. The sadness was gone, replaced by something fiercer, determination. "I'm not just fighting for the house," she said, voice steady. "I'm fighting for the dignity they thought they could strip from me." The lawyer nodded, flipping through the documents with keen interest. Then we'll start by building a case against Daniel. We need to prove that you were the sole financial contributor to the purchase. Lillian leaned forward. I have bank records, transaction histories, everything. The lawyer smirked, impressed. Good. And Bianca? Lillian's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. She's just a parasite feeding off a man who thinks he's untouchable. But I'll handle her in my own way. The lawyer chuckled. I like you already. Lillian straightened her posture, her mind sharpening with purpose. Daniel and Bianca thought they had won. They had no idea that their days of comfort were numbered. As Lillian walked out of the law firm, she felt lighter, but far from relieved. This was just the beginning. The battle ahead would be long, brutal even, but she wasn't afraid. She had nothing left to lose. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she made her way to her car, thoughts racing with strategies. She couldn't just rely on legal action. She needed to be smarter. Daniel was a man of ego, and Bianca was a woman of greed. If she wanted to destroy them, she needed to exploit their weaknesses. Pulling out her phone, she made a call. Victor, I need everything you can find on Bianca. Every mistake, every lie, every secret she's hiding. There was a pause before his voice hummed with amusement. Planning something wicked, are we? She smirked. I'm planning justice. That night, Lillian sat in her hotel room, sipping on wine as she scrolled through her old photos with Daniel. The man she had once dreamed of growing old with now felt like a stranger. She studied his face in the pictures, his confident smirk, the way he used to look at her with what she had believed was love. Was it all a lie? Shaking her head, she closed the album. It didn't matter anymore. Her love for him was buried beneath the rubble of his betrayal. What mattered now was the game. They had played her like a fool. Now she would show them what a woman scorned was truly capable of. Bianca twirled in front of the mirror, admiring the designer dress that clung perfectly to her curves. The necklace around her neck, Daniel's gift. The shoes, bought with his credit card. Everything about her screamed wealth, power, and victory. She had taken Lillian's place, and it was time the world saw her as the real Mrs. Williams. That night, she hosted a lavish party at what was once Lillian's home, inviting influential socialites, business moguls, and Daniel's closest associates. She moved through the crowd effortlessly, flashing her perfectly whitened smile, soaking in the admiration. Darling, you look stunning, one of the guests cooed, sipping champagne. Bianca laughed, tilting her head just enough for the diamonds in her earrings to catch the light. Well, I did take over from a rather outdated predecessor, she said with a fake pout. Laughter rippled through the group, but Daniel, standing in the background, wasn't laughing. Something gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't shake. He had been with Bianca for months now, yet something about tonight felt off. As the night wore on, his unease grew. When he stepped outside for air, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Enjoy the party while you can. The real owner of that house is coming for what's hers. Daniel's stomach twisted. He whipped his head around, scanning the crowd, his heartbeat accelerating. Had Lillian sent this? Was she watching? He shoved the phone into his pocket, swallowing hard. For the first time, he felt a sliver of fear. He had underestimated Lillian before. Maybe that was his biggest mistake. Lillian sat across from her lawyer, a calm but determined expression on her face as she signed the final documents to officially file her lawsuit against Daniel. The papers detailed fraudulent property transfer, financial deception, and breach of marital trust, a carefully structured case that would leave him with nothing if she won. Once we serve him the lawsuit, he'll have 30 days to respond, her lawyer explained, sliding the documents into a folder. If he tries to fight this, it's going to get ugly. Lillian exhaled, her fingers pressing against her temple as she thought through the next steps. Good, she murmured. I want it to get ugly. He deserves every bit of it. There was no emotion in her voice, only precision, strategy, and quiet wrath. She had once played the role of the devoted wife who sacrificed for love. Now she was playing to win. That afternoon, Daniel received a knock on the door. A legal courier stood there, holding out a thick envelope. Mr. Williams? The man asked. Daniel nodded, barely paying attention as he grabbed the papers. You've been served. The words hit like a punch to the gut. His eyes scanned the bold lawsuit notice, the details spelling out the reality of what Lillian was doing. She was taking everything. His chest tightened, his vision tunneling. "What the hell is this?" he growled, storming inside. Bianca, draped in silk, raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" Daniel threw the papers onto the table, his hands shaking. "She's suing me for the house, Bianca. She's fighting back." Bianca's smirk faltered, her carefully curated world cracking at the edges. "She won't win," she said, though the confidence in her voice wavered. But Daniel wasn't so sure. Daniel sat in his office, gripping the lawsuit documents as frustration gnawed at him. He had expected anger, desperation, maybe even tears from Lillian, but this calculated, legal attack, he hadn't seen it coming. The sound of his door opening pulled him from his thoughts. His old friend, Mark, stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "I heard about the lawsuit," Mark said, taking a seat. "Lillian isn't playing around, Daniel. She's out for blood." Daniel scoffed, running a hand over his face. "She's bluffing. She won't go through with it." Mark shook his head, leaning forward. "You don't get it, do you? The woman you humiliated? She's not the same Lillian anymore. She's dangerous now." Daniel laughed dryly, but there was no humor in it. "Lillian? Dangerous? She walked away without a fight." Mark smirked. "Yeah, and now she's back, ripping your world apart without even raising her voice." The words sat heavy between them. Daniel hated to admit it, but Mark was right. There was something chilling about Lillian's silence, the way she wasn't reacting emotionally, but strategically. "You should try to settle," Mark advised. "Negotiate before this ruins you." But Daniel wasn't ready to give in. "She's just mad. She'll calm down." Mark sighed, shaking his head. "You're underestimating her, man. And that's the biggest mistake you can make." As Mark left, Daniel stared out the window, his pulse pounding with unease. Was he really losing this war? Bianca paced the living room, her silk robe flowing behind her as she dialed Daniel's number for the third time that morning. When he finally answered, his voice was clipped. "What?" She exhaled sharply, gripping the phone. "I just got a call from my lawyer. Lillian's case is solid. They have proof that you forged the house transfer." Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I know," he muttered. Bianca's tone turned sharp. "You know, and you're just sitting there." Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "What do you want me to do, Bianca? Magic my way out of fraud?" she scoffed. "No, but you better fix this before I lose everything, too." Her voice cracked slightly at the end, revealing the fear she was trying to hide. That same day, Lillian's legal team filed an emergency motion, freezing the house from any further transactions. Daniel and Bianca were still living there, but if the lawsuit ruled in Lillian's favor, they would be evicted within weeks. The first real consequences of their deception were beginning to show. Bianca felt it first, the whispers in social circles, the side glances at events. The humiliation of being labeled a homewrecker was settling in. Daniel, on the other hand, started receiving calls from business associates pulling out of deals, wary of the scandal attached to his name. The first blow had been struck, and Lillian wasn't even done yet. Lillian sat in her lawyer's office as Victor slid another file across the table. "I found something interesting," he said, his tone laced with amusement. She flipped open the folder, her eyes scanning the bank statements, hidden transactions, and a string of financial discrepancies that all pointed to Bianca. "She's not just a mistress," Victor continued. "She's a serial con artist. Before Daniel, she was attached to two wealthy men, both of whom mysteriously lost large sums of money before she vanished from their lives." Lillian's stomach tightened, not with sadness, but with cold satisfaction. Bianca hadn't just destroyed her marriage. She had a pattern of destruction, using men as stepping stones before draining them dry. Lillian tapped a finger against the page, her mind calculating. "Does Daniel know?" Victor smirked. "Not yet, but I have a feeling he's about to find out the hard way." Meanwhile, Daniel's frustration reached a breaking point when his accounts were suddenly flagged for suspicious activity. Calls from his bank revealed unauthorized transfers, large sums of money redirected to an offshore account linked to Bianca. His heart pounded as he stormed into the house, shoving the bank statements in Bianca's face. "Care to explain this?" His voice was sharp, edged with anger. Bianca's smile faltered for the first time. Daniel, baby, I don't know what this is. Don't lie to me, he snapped. You've been siphoning money, haven't you? How much have you taken? Bianca's lips parted, but she had no excuse. For the first time since she entered his life, Daniel saw her for who she really was, not a woman who loved him, but a snake coiling around his wealth. Lillian sat in the conference room, staring at the divorce documents spread before her, the final severance of a marriage that no longer existed. She picked up the pen, her fingers steady, her heart free of hesitation. The woman who had once begged for Daniel's love no longer lived here. She signed her name with an elegant stroke, exhaling slowly as her lawyer nodded in approval. I'll have this served to him by tomorrow morning, she said. Lillian gave a small, satisfied nod. Make sure it's done publicly, she murmured. He wanted to humiliate me, didn't he? Let's see how he likes it. The lawyer chuckled. I like the way you think. Lillian stood, straightening her blazer, feeling lighter than she had in months. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life. Daniel was already drowning in legal issues when the divorce papers landed on his desk. His assistant, eyes filled with pity, set them down carefully. Your wife, Lillian, has filed for divorce. Daniel stared at the papers, his mind struggling to comprehend how quickly everything was unraveling. Lillian had moved on without a backward glance, while he was left watching his world crumble. Bianca, still fuming from their last fight, barely spared him a glance. Sign it and be done with it, she muttered. But Daniel barely heard her. He picked up the documents, his fingers tightening around the pages. Is this really it? The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had lost Lillian for good. Bianca had never been more on edge. Daniel had pulled away from her, his trust shattered, his money locked down under investigation. Her once lavish lifestyle was now hanging by a thread, and Lillian was winning from every angle. Bianca had built her life around manipulation, but now she could feel the control slipping through her fingers. One evening, as Daniel sat in his study, trying to salvage the mess he was in, Bianca stormed in, tossing a letter onto his desk. You need to fix this, she hissed. Daniel barely looked up. Fix what? She folded her arms. I'm being blacklisted. Do you know how humiliating it is to have doors closed in my face because people are talking? She leaned forward, her tone laced with desperation. You're losing everything, Daniel. And if you go down, I'm not going down with you. Daniel let out a bitter chuckle, rubbing his temples. I should have known, he muttered. Bianca frowned. What? He lifted his gaze, and for the first time, his eyes were clear of any illusion about her. You never cared about me, did you? It was always about what I could give you. Bianca's lips parted, but no denial came. That's what I thought, Daniel said, standing. He grabbed the divorce papers Lillian had sent him and signed them without hesitation. I lost the only woman who ever really loved me, he said, his voice hollow. But you were never worth losing her for. Bianca's face twisted in fury, but her power was gone. Daniel walked past her, leaving her standing in the middle of the study, alone with nothing but her own reflection in the glass window. Daniel sat at his office desk, his hands gripping his temples as he read through the latest emails from his financial advisors. The situation was far worse than he had imagined. His assets were frozen, multiple business deals had collapsed, and now the bank was raising concerns over the fraudulent property transfer Lillian had sued him for. His lawyer's voice echoed in his head from their last conversation. This isn't just a lawsuit, Daniel. It's a scandal. Investors don't want to be associated with someone who committed fraud against his own wife. He exhaled sharply, trying to push away the panic creeping up his spine. He had been so sure Lillian wouldn't fight back. But now, she was dismantling his empire without even speaking to him. Every connection he once had in the business world was either pulling away or refusing to meet with him. The weight of it all settled heavily on his chest. For the first time, he truly felt the consequences of his actions. As if sensing his distress, Bianca stormed into the office, her expensive perfume wafting through the room. I just got off the phone with my banker, she snapped, tossing her phone onto the desk. The account you were funding for me. It's empty, Daniel. He barely glanced at her, his patience hanging by a thread. I have bigger problems than your shopping habits, Bianca. She scoffed, placing her hands on her hips. Oh, really? Because your bigger problems are about to make me homeless. She leaned in, her voice sharp. Fix this now. Daniel let out a cold laugh, shaking his head. You think I can fix this? You think I have anything left to fix? Bianca's eyes widened, realization settling in. For the first time, she understood he was no longer her golden ticket. Bianca sat in front of her vanity, staring at her reflection. The luxury, the power, the illusion of security, it was all slipping away. She had climbed her way to the top using Daniel, and now he was sinking faster than she could jump ship. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen, an old contact, a man from her past. Her stomach twisted. She had sworn she would never go back to him, but desperate times called for desperate measures. With a deep breath, she answered, I need a favor. The voice on the other end chuckled darkly. I was wondering when you'd come crawling back. Bianca gritted her teeth, but forced her voice to remain steady. I just need help, just until things settle. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably before he finally responded. Meet me tonight. We'll talk. She hung up, her hands shaking. This wasn't the future she had envisioned for herself. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his study, staring at the last email from his biggest investor, another withdrawal. He was officially on the brink of losing everything. The door creaked open, and when he looked up, Bianca stood there, her expression unreadable. I'm leaving, she said, her voice flat. He let out a humorless chuckle. Of course you are. She didn't even bother denying it. There's no point in staying, Daniel. You're a sinking ship. He leaned back in his chair, nodding to himself. I should have known, he muttered. You never loved me. You just loved what I could give you. Bianca didn't argue. She simply picked up her designer handbag and walked out of the room. Daniel didn't try to stop her. As the door clicked shut, he realized he was truly alone. The following week, Daniel was jolted awake by a loud banging on the front door. He groggily pulled himself out of bed, his mind clouded from the lack of sleep. As he opened the door, a uniformed officer stood before him, flanked by two legal representatives. One of them held out an official document. Mr. Williams, you are hereby given notice to vacate the premises. This property now legally belongs to Mrs. Lillian Williams. Daniel's blood ran cold. He snatched the papers, his eyes scanning the legal jargon, but there was no mistaking what this was, the final blow. Lillian had won the lawsuit. The house was hers again. His home, his pride, his proof of success, gone. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. How long do I have? His voice was hoarse. The officer checked his watch. 48 hours. Inside, Bianca, who had not yet left as she had promised, came rushing down the stairs. What the hell is going on? She demanded. Daniel turned to face her, his face devoid of emotion. We're being evicted, he said simply. Bianca's eyes widened in disbelief. You mean I'm being evicted? She screeched. This was your mess, Daniel. Fix it. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. I don't have anything left to fix, Bianca. This house was never mine to begin with. She gaped at him, realizing for the first time that her safety net had disappeared. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving Daniel standing in the empty foyer, holding the eviction notice in his trembling hands. He had lost his wife, his money, his reputation, and now even his home. The weight of his downfall crashed onto him all at once. For the first time since this war with Lillian had begun, he finally understood the price of his betrayal. Daniel had managed to keep his downfall quiet until now. That morning, his name trended on social media, accompanied by humiliating headlines detailing his eviction, financial ruin, and fraudulent activities. News articles dissected his betrayal of Lillian, exposing how he had illegally transferred their marital home into his name. His business associates distanced themselves, and even former allies refused to return his calls. He sat at a coffee shop, his hood pulled low as he scrolled through the flood of comments. Serves him right. How does it feel to lose everything? Karma's real, and her name is Lillian. His hands clenched around his phone. He had once been respected, admired, feared. Now, he was a laughingstock. Every door was slamming shut, and the woman he had discarded was thriving without him. Meanwhile, Bianca was dealing with her own downfall. After leaving Daniel, She had attempted to rebuild her reputation, but no one wanted to be associated with her. Fashion brands pulled their endorsements, luxury events removed her from guest lists, and old friends ignored her messages. She stood in front of a boutique, staring at the no entry sign, her jaw tightening. Lillian's influence had gone further than she expected. She had assumed Daniel would bounce back, that they could both walk away unscathed. Instead, she was just as ruined as him. Furious, she grabbed her phone and dialed Daniel. "This is all your fault," she spat when he answered. "You dragged me down with you," he scoffed. "No, Bianca, you did that all on your own." Then he hung up. For the first time, she realized there was no one left to save her. Bianca paced her tiny apartment, her manicured nails tapping against the counter. Everything was gone. The lavish penthouse, the designer wardrobe, the VIP treatment, all of it stripped away. She had tried calling every wealthy man in her contacts, but they either ignored her or laughed in her face. The reality of her situation was suffocating. She had built her life on manipulation, using men as stepping stones, but now no one was willing to be her next victim. She had burned too many bridges, and now she was drowning alone. Slumping onto the worn-out couch, she covered her face with her hands. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. But deep down she knew Lillian had won. Meanwhile, Daniel was drinking alone in a rundown hotel room, staring blankly at the eviction papers crumpled on the nightstand. He had lost everything, his business, his wealth, his home, and his pride. He had believed Bianca was his future, but she had abandoned him without a second thought. The weight of his mistakes sat heavy in his chest. He picked up his phone and scrolled to Lillian's number, his thumb hovering over the call button. Would she even answer? Would she even care? He exhaled shakily, hesitating. He had once thought she needed him. Now, he was the one who couldn't stop thinking about her. But before he could dial, a notification popped up, a news article featuring Lillian at a gala event, smiling, radiant, powerful. Daniel swallowed hard. She had moved on. And for the first time, he realized he was the only one still stuck in the past. Daniel sat on a park bench, staring at nothing. His expensive suits were gone, his tailored image reduced to a man who no longer belonged anywhere. The city he once dominated now felt foreign to him, a place where he was just another forgotten name. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone. He had ignored his mother's calls for weeks, too ashamed to face her disappointment. But today, he had no one else. When he finally pressed the call button, her voice was filled with concern. "Daniel, are you okay?" He exhaled sharply, gripping the phone tighter. "No, Mom, I'm not." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "Come home, son." The offer stung, a reminder that he was no longer the powerful man he once was. But he had nowhere else to go. Across town, Lillian sat at her office, flipping through reports. Her company was thriving, her reputation stronger than ever. She had rebuilt herself without Daniel. When she received a text from an old friend saying, "Daniel is completely ruined. He has nothing left," she simply placed her phone down without replying. She had thought this moment would bring her joy, but instead, it brought closure. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had already won. Standing, she walked toward the window, watching the city below. She had been broken once, but now she was unshakable. And for the first time in a long time, she was truly at peace. Lillian sat in her office, her fingers gliding over the sleek surface of her desk as she looked at the new company expansion plans laid out before her. It had been months since she'd filed for divorce, and her life had transformed into something she hadn't thought possible. She was no longer the broken woman who had been discarded and humiliated. She was powerful, respected, and in control. The events of the past had molded her into someone she barely recognized, but for the first time, she felt proud of who she had become. Her business was thriving, her network expanding, and her image was one of strength, independence, and confidence. Every decision she made now was calculated, and every step she took felt purposeful. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tina, her best friend from college. "Are you coming tonight? I heard about the gala." Lillian smiled at the thought of attending the event. It was an invitation to celebrate women in business, and it felt fitting, almost symbolic. She had built this life on her own, and now she was being recognized for it. She had won. Lillian quickly typed back a reply. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As she finished her work, a part of her thought back to those darker days when she had sat in her hotel room, grieving her losses. But tonight, she would stand in that room with her head held high, because she had proven to herself and to the world that she was more than the woman Daniel had left behind. Daniel had lost everything, but the one thing he couldn't seem to escape was the weight of his guilt. He had tried to move forward, to rebuild, but no matter how many new business ideas he had or how many people tried to help him, there was no erasing what he had done to Lillian. It wasn't just about losing his wealth. It was the realization that he had lost the one person who truly cared about him. And for the first time, he understood that his life had been a hollow pursuit of status and materialism. Lillian had always been the heart of everything good in his life, and now she was gone. One afternoon, Daniel picked up his phone, staring at Lillian's number. He had tried calling before, but she never answered. This time, he left a message, his voice shaky with emotion. Lillian, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that I see everything now. I see who I was, and I'm not that man anymore. I regret everything. He paused, swallowing hard, unsure of what he was hoping to achieve. After a long silence, he added, I don't know what else to say, except that I miss you. I miss what we had. If you ever want to talk. He left the sentence unfinished, as though somehow hoping that she could hear his heart in the message, even if it was too late. After he sent the message, he stared at his phone, waiting. But there was no reply. Weeks passed, and Daniel's world continued to spiral. The once vibrant man who had confidently strutted into rooms now found himself avoiding people, reduced to a shadow of his former self. His health began to deteriorate, worn down by stress, lack of sleep, and a constant gnawing guilt. One evening, after an attempt to meet with an old colleague ended in another rejection, Daniel collapsed in his office, his vision blurring as his body betrayed him. He woke up hours later in a hospital room, his mother at his side. Daniel, she whispered, her voice filled with worry. You need to take care of yourself. But Daniel didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. His business had fallen apart, Bianca had abandoned him, and the woman he had hurt, Lillian, had moved on, leaving him behind. His doctor confirmed what he already feared. Stress and exhaustion had led to high blood pressure and other complications, but Daniel was too consumed with his regret to listen. His mother tried to comfort him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already dying inside. The memories of his past, of Lillian's love, her sacrifices, haunted him. He couldn't help but wonder if she ever thought of him, even for a second. But that wasn't what troubled him the most. The real question that gnawed at him was whether he had left it too late. Was it too late to fix what he had broken, to rebuild something he never should have destroyed? That night, as the hospital room grew darker, Daniel made a decision. He would try to make things right, no matter what it cost, even if it meant losing everything again. Lillian hadn't thought about Daniel in weeks, at least not in the way she used to. His name no longer brought pain, only distant memories. She was too busy building the future she deserved. But when her assistant placed an envelope on her desk with a concerned expression, her curiosity piqued. It's from a hospital, the assistant murmured, eyeing her carefully. Lillian hesitated before opening it. Inside was Daniel's medical report, along with a note from his mother. Lillian, I know you don't owe him anything, but he is not well. I thought you should know. She sat frozen, her mind spinning. Daniel, the man who once stood so untouchable, so proud, was now in a hospital bed, weak and alone. She should feel satisfied. She should feel nothing at all. And yet, the thought of him suffering didn't bring her joy. Against her better judgment, Lillian found herself walking through the sterile white corridors of the hospital later that evening. When she stepped into Daniel's room, he looked up, eyes widening in shock. Lillian? His voice was weak disbelief coloring his tone. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she set down the basket of fruit she had brought and studied him. He looked nothing like the man she once knew. He was thinner, his usual arrogance replaced by something defeated, broken. Finally, she spoke, her tone measured. I didn't come to gloat, Daniel. Your mother reached out to me. He swallowed hard, his voice hoarse when he finally said, I don't deserve this. She met his gaze, unwavering. No, you don't, but I'm not here for you. I'm here because I choose to be better than the person you tried to make me. Bianca scrolled through her phone, her hands tightening as she read the headlines. While Daniel had disappeared from the public eye, Lillian had flourished, gaining admiration for her strength and resilience. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had tried to steal Lillian's life, only to end up losing everything herself. No invitations to social events, no wealthy men willing to fund her lifestyle, no grand parties where she was the center of attention. She was forgotten, discarded, just as she had once hoped Lillian would be. Her stomach twisted as she came across a picture from the gala Lillian had attended weeks ago, looking stunning, powerful, untouched by the past. It was clear now Lillian had won in every possible way. Desperation clawed at Bianca as she grabbed her purse and hurried out of her apartment. She had one last card to play. An hour later, she stood outside Lillian's office building, her expensive heels clicking against the marble floor as she approached the receptionist. "Tell Lillian Williams that Bianca needs to see her," she said smoothly. The receptionist barely glanced at her. "Do you have an appointment?" Bianca clenched her jaw. "She'll want to see me." The woman made a quick call, then turned back with an expressionless face. "Ms. Williams said she has nothing to say to you." Bianca's breath caught in her throat. "That's it. She won't even." The receptionist cut her off. She said, and I quote, "I don't waste time on people who don't matter." Heat flooded Bianca's face. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be insignificant. Daniel wasn't sure how long he sat in his hospital bed after Lillian left, but his mind refused to rest. She had come, but she hadn't stayed. And why should she? She owed him nothing. But still, he couldn't let her go without trying one last time. Not to get her back, but to give her the apology she had always deserved. So, with a pen in his shaking hand, he wrote. Each word felt like a confession, a plea, and a goodbye all at once. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He knew he wasn't entitled to it. Instead, he wrote about his regrets, his mistakes, and the love he had taken for granted. It was the most honest thing he had ever put to paper. When he was done, he sealed the letter and sent it to Lillian's office. Lillian found the envelope waiting for her the next morning. She almost threw it away, but curiosity, or maybe something deeper, made her open it. As she read Daniel's words, a strange mixture of emotions swirled inside her. He had laid himself bare, acknowledging every wound he had inflicted on her, every moment he had made her feel small and unworthy. He didn't beg for a second chance, didn't make excuses. He simply admitted the truth. He had lost her because he had never truly valued her when he had the chance. When she finished reading, she exhaled slowly, setting the letter down. She wouldn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Daniel had finally accepted the truth. And so had she. Lillian stood by her office window, watching the city move beneath her. The letter from Daniel lay on her desk, but it no longer held power over her. His apology was a whisper in a life she had already left behind. The woman who had once wept over his betrayal no longer existed. She had reinvented herself, stepping into a version of herself that didn't just survive, but thrived. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Tina stepped in, her eyes filled with curiosity as she glanced at the letter. "Are you going to reply?" she asked carefully. Lillian smiled, shaking her head. "No, he doesn't need my words anymore. He needs to sit with his regrets, just like I once had to sit with my pain." She picked up the envelope and placed it in a drawer, closing it without hesitation. "I have a meeting to get to," Tina smirked. "You're amazing, you know that?" Lillian exhaled, glancing at her reflection in the glass. For the first time in years, she believed it. That evening, Lillian attended a business dinner, surrounded by some of the most influential minds in the industry. The old her would have felt out of place, but now, she commanded every room she entered. A man approached her, his dark eyes filled with admiration. Lillian Williams, the woman everyone's been talking about. She turned to him with a composed smile. "Depends on what they're saying." He chuckled. "That you're unstoppable." She tilted her glass. "They'd be right." He extended his hand. "I'm Nathan Cole. I'd love to discuss a possible collaboration." As their hands met in a firm shake, she realized something. This was her life now. A life where her name stood on its own, not attached to Daniel, not shadowed by betrayal, but shining on its own merits. She wasn't the woman he left behind anymore. She was the woman he could never reach again. Daniel sat on a park bench, the crisp autumn air biting at his skin. His world had been reduced to something simple, something quiet. The money, the power, the lavish lifestyle, all of it was gone. And yet the silence wasn't what haunted him. It was the absence of her. The realization that he had destroyed the only good thing in his life. He had tried to make amends, but Lillian had already made her choice. A part of him had hoped that his apology would open a door, even just a crack, but it remained firmly shut. As he sat lost in thought, a familiar figure appeared on the pathway. Lillian. She was walking with confidence, her presence like a force of nature. She hadn't seen him yet, but something in him told him that even if she did, she wouldn't stop. She had moved on. He stood unsure of what he was doing, unsure if it was even right. "Lillian," he called softly. She turned, her eyes landing on him, but there was no flicker of the past in her expression. No anger, no sadness, just calm. She took a slow step toward him, her posture poised. "Daniel," she acknowledged, her tone neither warm nor cold, just distant. He swallowed, unsure of what to say, unsure if there was anything left to say at all. "You look good," he murmured. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I am." Silence stretched between them before he finally asked, "Do you ever think about us?" Lillian studied him for a moment before answering, her words the final nail in the coffin of their past. "I used to, but not anymore." She gave him one last look before walking away, her silhouette disappearing into the crowd. And for the first time, Daniel knew he had truly lost her. Lillian sat in her penthouse apartment, staring at the city lights. She had everything she had once dreamed of: success, confidence, peace. And yet there was one final piece left. A piece that had nothing to do with revenge or proving herself, but with letting go. She had held on to the past long enough, and though she had found closure, she realized that forgiveness was not for Daniel. It was for herself. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she never thought she would call again. Daniel answered on the third ring, his voice quiet. "Lillian." She took a deep breath. "I'm not calling to reconcile," she clarified immediately. "I just wanted to say, I forgive you." The line was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "I don't deserve that." She closed her eyes, feeling the weight lift from her chest. "Maybe not, but I deserve to be free from the past." Daniel exhaled shakily. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." Lillian smiled to herself. Not because he was redeemed, but because she was finally completely free. After ending the call, she stepped onto her balcony, letting the cool air wash over her. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean excusing. It simply meant choosing peace over resentment, and she had finally chosen herself. She had chosen happiness. Months later, Lillian found herself at a prestigious gala, dressed in a gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. She was no longer the woman who had been left on the sidewalk, luggage thrown at her feet. She was a force, a name that people whispered with admiration. As she moved through the event, she caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, Daniel. He was alone, dressed simply, no longer the man who once thrived on excess. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and then nothing. No words were exchanged, no tension lingered. He was simply another person in the room, no longer the center of her world. She turned away, focusing on the people who mattered, on the opportunities ahead. As the night ended, she stepped outside, breathing in the crisp night air. Nathan, the businessman she had partnered with, walked up beside her. "You ready to go?" he asked. She nodded, her lips curving into a genuine smile. More than ever, as they walked toward the waiting car, she knew this was her real happy ending. Not revenge, not bitterness, but a life where she was whole, where she was loved, not because of a man, but because she had learned to love herself first. And that was the greatest victory of all. Here's the Bible verse for the story, Isaiah 61, verse 7. "Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours." Moral of the story: betrayal may shake you, but it cannot break you unless you let it. True strength is not found in revenge, but in self-respect, resilience, and the ability to rise above those who wronged you. Lillian's story teaches us that healing is the greatest revenge, and the best way to win is to move forward with grace, wisdom, and success. Forgiveness is not for the betrayer, it is for yourself, so you can be free to embrace the future without the weight of the past. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.